Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Radio Dead Air Tech Q&A. You've got questions, we've got guesses. I'm Nash. I've been doing Radio Dead Air for ages and ages. In addition to that, I'm also an IT professional. With me, as always, my producer, Mike Gearman, who also works in IT. We'll be taking your tech questions, as always. Send those to us tonight at requests@radiodeadair.com. How you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. I slept in because I stayed up till 1 a.m. last night, but that's my fault.
So yeah, it's I've been talking a little bit with your brother in South Carolina.
Oh dear God. Okay, hang on. You're gonna have to narrow that down. Which one?
The one he was fuck. I think it's Patrick's the one dealing with the outage from the fucking hurricane.
Yeah. Okay, that's probably Patrick. Because I didn't see Eric say anything about it. So
no, it's so
if he had an outage, he's still out and he's just not talking about it.
It reminded me of a little tech thing that's kind of is being lost as we start losing people with actual landline telephones. Did you know that if you still have a landline telephone in an outage, you still have access to at least 5 volts of electricity?
Yeah.
Because the phone line transmits electricity as well as a phone signal. You can make an adapter that you can plug into your regular phone jack that will allow you to charge tons of devices like your mobile phone or anything else that relies on a USB style charger.
Your mobile phone will, of course, depend on the cell towers being up, but
right. You'll still have you'll be able to charge your devices, and yeah, it's one of those little people also can use it to make it an emergency flashlight out of it. You just have to have a really long cord, but you can make an emergency flashlight out of the power coming out of your phone. Of course, people aren't using landline phones as much anymore, so but yeah, that's one of those really oh shit kind of things. If you lose a phone signal like that, that's real bad, because that's if the phone lines go out, that's bad news. Of course, it's all been kind of bad news there. They are slowly putting things back together, but yeah, it's been ugh. Are they still even running landline phone wires to draw new developments? I don't know.
I don't believe so. I don't think there's a requirement anymore. In fact, a number of places, the phone companies want to dig up their existing landlines, and the feds are saying, when you have cell coverage in the area that is reliable, you can dig up those landlines, but not until then. Oh, and you've got to maintain them until you have cell coverage in the area. And the phone companies are going like, oh, but that's expensive, and we don't want to. We just want to collect money and not do anything.
It's particularly an issue in rural areas where they don't have cell serve. There's a lot of America that's just not served by any sort of cellular coverage or internet coverage that's not satellite based, which of course that's going to bring us to our first story this week. There are exceedingly few satellite providers in the United States for television, which for some places where it's the only way to get television that's not over the air network television. Satellite's the only way of doing it. Yeah. And it looked like there was going to be one less, as DirecTV was expressing an interest in purchasing Dish satellite network, which also includes Sling TV. I don't know if you knew that, but Sling TV is a
and of course Dish has massive amounts of debt, which is why they're looking to get bought out.
Oh yes, and that is a bit of a problem because the people who own that massive amount of debt are saying like hell, because it would mean they take a $1.6 billion haircut.
Yes, and now I'm going to repeat what Nash just said. $1.6 billion. That's how much they would lose in the debt realignment on this purchase. Which means Dish has well over 1.6 billion in debt.
Yeah, part of this is also a matter of they're not the sale isn't even really technically a sale. They're going to be purchasing Dish and Sling for a nominal fee of $1, but in exchange, they're taking on $10 billion of Dish's debt. And if that sounds a little bit familiar, that's exactly how AT&T spun off Warner Brothers. Discovery took on AT&T's debt. What was it? 30 billion of that?
It was a ridiculous amount.
And AT&T still has a ridiculous amount of debt from those years where John Stankey, I must reiterate, the CEO of AT&T at the time was named John Stankey. That's not a joke. That's for real. When he went on that buying spree, he brought up Warner Brothers and all the other crap and Dish and all these other things, trying to turn AT&T into an instant Disney. Did not work well. But this might be a problem because debt holders, at least the way it works in America, debt holders, if they object to this and they're like, "Excuse me, you're not making my money go away for your own."
Yeah, they can block it. Now, of course, so can the government. The DOJ can file an antitrust if they think this merger is not in the interest of the populace. Of course, the problem here is that if this merger doesn't happen, Dish may just go belly up.
I mean, it kind of feels a little bit like brinkmanship here. Like they thought, well, what else are you going to do? This is the only way we're going to salvage anything out of Dish and people's jobs and blah, 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 which is always a lie because they always do redundancies with a merger. But it's a little bit brinkmanship here because they had to know that not only would the feds object to two of the largest, they would, if they merged, they would become the single largest satellite provider in the United States. They would become de facto the satellite provider. So they had to know that would have been one objection. They had to know that their creditors would object. I'm not really quite sure what the game they're trying to play out of this is.
Maybe someone's trying to deliberately piss off Elon Musk, which is okay with me.
Well, I don't know if DirecTV and Dish do satellite internet. As far as I know, they just do television.
Yeah, but it would not be difficult to add internet services to that, I would think.
Well, Elon's
it'd be expensive.
Starlink is different than regular satellite internet in that he uses lower altitudes. Well, I say he knows how, like he even designed this shit. It uses lower altitude satellites, and it uses tons of them.
Yes,
the coverage is
and it pisses off the astronomers.
Yeah, because
I had to think on that word for a second because I always mess up astronomer and astrologer, and the science side really doesn't like it when you get that one wrong. Astrologers couldn't give a shit.
Well, we've got some other news from tech land. This is from South Korea, in fact. Let me double check. I want to double check which generation Samsung built for NVIDIA. I believe it was the RTX 3000 series.
It was.
Yes, it was the 30 series, the 3060, 3080, 3070. A couple things to note about them. Number one, their price, at least before the crypto boom, was surprisingly reasonable comparatively. Compared to the 2000 series where, the RTX 2080 Ti was like $1,200 and the 3080 came out and the 3080 was like, here, it's $700. So it's like already the price came way down. But then NVIDIA went back to TSMC for the RTX 40 series and price go way back up. Now, I'm sure that's not the only factor. It's also the fact that they're a bunch of greedy bastards. But something to note here is TSMC has part of why NVIDIA went back to them, part of why even Intel is lining up to go to them when Intel has their own fab, quite famously, or did. They're kind of doing a spin-off.
It's because TSMC has a 3-nanometer process that is working.
And is supposedly got a 2-nanometer coming very, very soon. We've explained this before. If you're not understanding what we're talking about when we talk about nanometers, the process of taking
they're really small meters.
The process of taking a silicon wafer and etching the transistors, I say etching, it's a way of doing it, getting the transistors onto that silicon wafer, it's called the lithography. That's the process they send them through. The smaller it becomes, imagine, it's kind of like writing. Imagine they keep being able to write smaller and smaller and smaller.
So they can fit more stuff into the same space.
The trick is being able to rotate to be legible as the smaller you get. It's not really how, but that's the analogy we're using here. Only TSMC seems to have mastered the trick of it. And why we're talking about it is Samsung has a 3-nanometer process as well, but it has, reports are the yields for that process
are tiny.
20% are viable. That means of every 100 silicon wafers they send through the machine, they only get about 20 usable ones come out.
Yeah.
80 are junk.
And that's the high end of the yield. Sometimes they get as low as 11%. Now, part of the problem is that they chose to try to do a different type of transistor, which, if it had worked, would have been amazing, but it didn't.
Which I have to wonder why they would gamble like that. If they with a technology.
My guess is someone inside sold it and said, "Hey, we can do this. Here's the technology. Here's what's going to happen." And maybe they did some of the math wrong. Maybe they just said they guessed wrong on where they would be, with the lithography, and they just said, "Okay, I'm going to retire now."
So the rumors are Samsung is looking to be selling its Foundry, which is kind of concerning because at the same time, Intel is also looking to be selling its Foundry. And the question is, who would be in a position to actually buy them?
Yeah. Now, I will say one thing about the Samsung model. It's called gate-all-around, or GAA transistors. And the other type is called FinFET transistors. So TSMC use traditional FinFET or their 3-nanometer, but they're going to be switching to GAA for 2-nanometer when they go switch to that in 2025. The question will be, will they hit the same sort of scaling issues and yield issues that Samsung did? And if they do, this will be, I won't say helpful to Samsung, but it'll point out that the guys who did it say, "Oh, look, see, it was as hard as we thought it was."
Well, there is only so far you can shrink lithography on silicon transistor process before you start running into the laws of physics, which is when you get too small, when the transistors get the connections are too small, too thin, that's when electricity starts acting weird.
Yep.
And you can't have electricity acting weird when it's the basis of the computer.
So too small lithography, basically, I read this somewhere, so don't jump on me, audience, if I get this wrong. Too small lithography, the electron may go, "Yeah, I'm in this transistor, but that transistor over there looks better, so I'm just going to hop over to it."
Yeah, and that's you
Not
don't
good.
want that to happen. So the reason this is concerning is Intel is trying to get rid of their fab process. Intel it doesn't want their fab process. Now Samsung doesn't. Who is going to buy these fabrication processes? Who has got the resources to make them viable and competitive against TSMC, which quite simply TSMC is a giant that dominates pretty much the entire. If you want the cutting edge stuff, there are other companies out there that make transistors, but if you want the cutting edge stuff, TSMC is the only people who can provide it. And the cutting edge stuff is the only way we get faster CPUs, faster GPUs. Without that cutting edge, technology sort of hits a plateau.
Yeah, until there's a breakthrough in a new type of basically new development in the field where someone goes, hey, what if we did it this way? And they suddenly see a massive performance increase. I'm not saying that won't happen. It's, but so it's the kind of thing you cannot predict.
Yeah. So we're coming up against that too small lithography potentially, because we don't know people said that like going beyond 10 nanometer was not going to be viable, and they managed to do it. So we don't know how far it's going to go. But we might be faced with having TSMC and Taiwan being strategically critical, not just for home use and business use, but including military use for transistor technology. And that puts us in a really, really, really uncomfortable position, because there's China, and China, as far as they're concerned, Taiwan belongs to them, even if it doesn't. They are.
In fact, the Chinese premier just said, "Oh yeah, no, we're totally taking over Taiwan." He just reiterated it again the other day.
So just makes this an even bigger mess. Having Intel and Samsung being, on their own, at least meant we still had some options. But Intel has been struggling to go beyond 7 nanometer. They were stuck at 14 nanometer for ages. And I don't know how someone else's the process of spinning these off, the process of selling the fabrications, TSMC is already so far ahead. That's going to slow them down. The process of turning into new companies and blah, 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 restructuring, all that stupid shit. TSMC is just going to keep getting that much further ahead and that much more strategically necessary to everyone. So I
would say TSMC has been looking at moving significant chunks of their operation out of Taiwan because of China.
That's been going slow, and they tried to set up some stuff in America, and they complained about American workers a lot. The other issue, of course, is prices. If TSMC is the only game in town, that means they're the ones who can decide how much NVIDIA and Intel and everybody else, AMD, all those companies, they get to be the ones to decide how much they pay to get them to make take their designs and turn them into, chips. It was already stated that when NVIDIA left TSMC to go to Samsung to make the RTX 30 series, by doing so, they lost a favored status with TSMC. And when NVIDIA was forced to come back to TSMC, they got charged a lot more per chip. Now, right now, NVIDIA is not really concerned about that, hand over fist with the AI bubble. But it's not always going to be that way. And we have to, pay the difference on whatever gets produced. And also, this could get a little ugly when it comes to, I mean, I guess TSMC is trying to present themselves as Switzerland, allowing all comers, but could get a little weird and ugly. We got some very competitive companies like NVIDIA and Intel and AMD are all struggling against each other in the same markets. This is not great, is what I'm saying. And I don't know a good resolution to it because it's just, if they can't make this process viable, if they can't be a viable competitor, I don't know what we're going to do. It's last one this week. This one actually was brought to my attention by Mark Grondin over at Spectrum Pulse. He is a contributor to the Patreon, a longtime friend of the show. He got in touch with me last week and said his USB port, when he tried to plug in his external drive stuff into the USB port, it gave him a message that the USB device was pulling too much power and it had to shut off the port. And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound good. Because when that happens out of nowhere, usually that points to a hardware failure. That means there's some sort of short. That means something's gone badly wrong with your USB system. And if it's in a laptop, that's an expensive repair. But then, and this might affect some of you out there, so be aware of it, I looked it up and guess what?
This is Microsoft's fault.
This is Microsoft's fault. There is a update to Windows 11 that not only could potentially cause reboot loops, it can also cause issues with USB and Bluetooth devices, causing them to stop working, blue screens of death. The update is September 26th update, KB 5043145. They've stopped rolling it out. And they have a something called the known issue rollback service, which they had to, I love the fuck they had to implement this as they stopped doing beta testing before rolling out updates. As they're testing, their QA has shrunk at Microsoft. Now they had to come up with a whole protocol to say, oops, we should not have rolled this out. Take it back, take it back, take it back.
Now, I'm reminded, this happened at work. Not this particular one. This happened at work, though. We had, and we talked about it on the show, I think, about a year or two back. Microsoft released one of their massive updates for Windows. And then they pulled it because there were issues. And then they re-released it.
Yeah. And
they pulled it again because there were still issues. And the reason the issues hadn't been caught the first time is because so many issues would have been with it the first time. The people who would have caught it that time said, no, I'm not doing that one until they re-release it. Oh, okay, it's re-released. Oh, no, it screwed up my machine now, too, with the re-release. And it went back and forth. I want to say 3 or 4 times. And yes, this is very much the case that Microsoft needs to bring back their in-house testing units to a greater extent to avoid this sort of nonsense. But they don't want to because that costs money.
Well, if you've been having issues since September 26th, if you look back and hey, that's when that started. Your USB has been acting up. Your Bluetooth's been acting up. If you have, it's particularly hit Asus laptops pretty hard. If those are having issues with your laptop, again, the update is KB 5043145. If you have that update on Windows 11, see about rolling it back. Now, the trouble is it's a command prompt rollback, and it's not something we can walk you through here.
No. So your best bet on that is to find an article, and there'll be a couple. Make sure when you're Google searching that you switch over to web so you don't see the AI nonsense. Mm-hmm. To look up how to fix it, because AI will screw this up. Say, there was a story this week about a guy who had his own little AI thing he programmed, and he told it to SSH into his computer. And it SSH'd into his computer eventually. It had to find the computer first. Did a little searching. It finally got into SSH in there. And the credentials he told it to use were super user credentials. So while it was in there, it decided, I'm going to update this thing. I'm not sure I followed that part of the story because he didn't tell it to do that, but it apparently decided on its own. Probably bad programming on his part, and bricked his machine. So yeah, avoid the AI versions of how to fix this. Find the actual articles. Read them on your phone. It's not simple, but it is straightforward.
Oh, and just before we get to the questions, I discovered a new phenomenon today, and I hate it. I was looking up some to see if there have been any changes to encoder settings on OBS for AMD graphics. What changes have been made to OBS, because I'd like to offload my encoding to the integrated GPU that I'm not using in my Ryzen processor. It's not being used, and I don't want my main processor to have to worry about it, and I don't want my my gaming GPU to worry about it. Well, I try to look up some articles, and of course, no one makes articles anymore. It's all videos. And I look at these videos, and I specifically put in my search for 2024 because I'm looking for updated information. It's been a struggle with OBS getting this to work. And I look at these videos for a second, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of these about the subject. But then I look a little closer when they were actually uploaded.
AI-made videos.
No, they're not AI. They were actually uploaded 2020, 2021, 2022. It's just the people who made the videos changed the title to read 2024.
So that they would start getting hits again and possibly get some of that loose change that Google has rattling around.
Fucking scummy as shit. And the reason why it's important is OBS has gone through several updates. It's up to version 30 now. And so has the driver structure for AMD. So I'd like to know if they've made any changes to the encoder settings, because there are some flags you can turn on and off that change things. No, motherfuckers, fuck you. Like, goddamn. Anyway, all right, just had to get off my chest because that was just some scummy shit. Not even AI. It's still good old-fashioned human assholes. Which, that sounds like the weirdest, snack food. Anyway.
Don't buy that snack food, people.
Good old-fashioned human assholes. Anyway.
Pepperidge Farms, human assholes.
Anyway, hickory smoked. All right, first question's from Dave in Illinois. Hey, Nash and Mike. I found an old Atari Lynx at a Goodwill. Good fucking find. And it's in decent enough, I guess you meant the right condition, but it's not there. And it's decent. Oh, no. And it's decent enough. Sorry. But someone left old batteries in it, and the compartment is full of corrosion, and it won't turn on. You have any good recommendations for how to clean this off without hurting the electronics? Whew. Oh, corrosion in old electronics. That is a pain in the butt.
Okay, so one of the problems here is that corrosion may have been caused by battery leakage, which happens with older batteries.
Yeah.
And it may have affected the internal electronics, things you're not seeing in the battery in the battery case. So I'm saying that to manage your expectations. It may be that you can clean up all the corrosion with what we tell you and still not have a working device.
Dealing with corrosion on terminals and such, typically a good way to deal with that is non-destructive acid. In this case, we'd mean something like white vinegar or lemon. I prefer white vinegar is probably a better option here.
I'd say white vinegar because you can buy it in bulk, and if you're cleaning this, maybe you end up cleaning other electronics as well. You go, oh yeah, I still have white vinegar left.
It It will take a little time depending on the amount of corrosion, but it will clean it. It will break through it and clean it off eventually. Once you've used the white vinegar, you're also going to have to go over it afterwards with some isopropyl alcohol, 90% plus, because vinegar can leave residue, and also some of that corrosion getting cleaned off can leave residue. You want to get rid of as much of that residue once you're done. Now, the next problem with that, however, is it's like Mike was saying, leaking batteries. They're not very circumspect or discreet. I've seen this quite a few times. What you're going to need to do is open up the rest of your Atari links that you found. Check the board for any signs of corrosion there as well, because what can happen is corrosion will get on the PCB. It will eat through traces. It will eat through connections, and it will cause a bunch of other problems. You're going to need to find any corrosion that's actually gone from the batteries to any of the other electronics and very carefully clean that off. Sometimes the corrosion will just rub off on a PCB or whatnot. You also have to be very careful because it can lift some traces off the PCB. And then once the traces lift, then you have to do some more intense work to fix it. Sometimes it's as simple as getting some enameled wire and running a bodge from one point in the trace to another, a workaround. Sometimes you actually have to grind down the PCB to find the copper again and then apply the bod. It's can get kind of rough depending on how you do it. Be very careful when you're doing this. If you have some sort of magnification, I'd recommend doing that, because even tiny bits of corrosion in the wrong place. And here's something I just found out the other night. I wasn't aware of this. Fellow I watch on YouTube, That Does Not Compute is his channel. He did this incredible project. I suggest go look at the video when you're done here tonight. Did this incredible project where, and he went completely overboard. He wanted to fix a Macintosh.
Nash, you're saying someone doing internet videos went completely overboard? I'm shocked.
He wanted to repair a Macintosh SE. But he was one of the problem with older Macintoshes is their batteries would explode a lot and it would take out parts of the motherboard. There are people who are making new motherboards, just the PCBs, based on the old trade, because they're not that complicated. From the 80s, they're complex, but they're not as complicated as modern motherboards for modern computers would be. So there are people who are making replicas. He made it, so he went through, it's a great video. He goes through the whole process of removing stuff from the old motherboard, putting it on, and coming up with new ways to work around it. It's a great video. Why I'm bringing it up is he mentions that with integrated circuits, chips, those black squares you see all over your circuit boards, sometimes the corrosion can crawl up the legs and get inside those little black squares and ruin, and the corrosion can ruin the chips from the inside out. That can get really freaking nasty. Yeah, soft toothbrush, Drake Mayer, that is correct. Soft toothbrush is a good way. Do not put very much pressure, if any, on the toothbrush.
Yeah. Q-tip also works.
Yeah. With corrosion, with a soft brush, you can pretty much push the corrosion on a PCB. You can rub it away. I've seen some people talk about using erasers, but I think that might be a little too abrasive, so don't fuck with those. But keep in mind, once you've cleaned off the corrosion off those battery terminals, you may have a bigger job. So be aware of that, and do check that PCB before you go any further, because if you do put batteries in it after cleaning off the corrosion and something could short, something could be damaged. Well, anyway, good luck with it. All right, next one is from Tom R. Okay, he says, hey, Nash, Mike, and Cats. I love this question, by the way. This is my favorite one this week. Stay with me because this one's weird. I hate hard drive noise, but I don't have the money to replace my big hard drive with an SSD. I feel you there. I have a 12 terabyte hard drive. I would love to, I don't even use all of it yet. I would love to swap it out for like 2 4 terabyte SSDs. That would be bare minimum somewhere $400 to $600. And I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah, no. It's a hard buy.
But I do have a USB 3.2 super speed. I guess that's the 20 gigabit per second is what that means on my motherboard. So here's my idea. Can I just run like a 10-foot USB extension cable under my closet door and put the hard drive in an enclosure in my closet? Would that work without any problems? I know it's stupid, but the noise drives me crazy. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, so it's a maybe yes and a maybe no situation.
Well, it's kind of a depends.
Yes, and the reason it depends is because USB 3.2 SS20, depending on which spec you look at for it, has a max cable length of anywhere from 0.8 meters to 0 meters, and 0 meters means no, you just use it on the computer.
Well, another part of this issue here is there is a reason we still use SATA for hard drives, where it's like you're looking at it and you go, but wait, we have USB 3.2 on the motherboard. It can be faster than SATA. Why aren't we just inside the computer connecting it to USB? That's because of how it talks to the CPU. There is, between the CPU and the USB interface, and between the CPU and a SATA interface, there's a lot less latency involved in talking to SATA than there is to USB. Even super fast USB connected to an external drive. If you are using this for applications and games, then switching it to an external drive may work, but you will notice some latency. It will take longer to read. It will not be, you like, but I have all this bandwidth. You do, but there is a distance that causes the CPU needs to be able to react to the hard drive and vice versa. SATA allows for that because the way it's designed, the way it's placed on the motherboard, it is closer, big air quotes there, closer to the CPU than USB is, just by the nature of USB. That's also why you're noticing servers have started doing this. There is a fiber optic based M.2 NVMe. It's not M.2. M.2 is the form factor. It's an NVMe cable. That is, and it's fiber optic. So they're trying to do external connections based on the NVMe connection, which is probably if you need that kind of speed from an external device, it's probably a good way to go going forward. It's not cheap and it's very complicated, but it is super damn fast, and it can, because it's NVMe and that's closer to the CPU, it can respond a lot faster than any of the other stuff. Can you hook up the hard drive, the router, USB port, and transfer a file over Wi-Fi? Well, I mean, you could, but there would still be some latency. It's still not going to react as fast. If you're just talking about media files, if you're just watching videos off this thing, or if you're using it for a cache file for, say, video editing or something, that's not quite so dependent on latency. That's why a lot of media servers work just fine across a network. That those are fairly straightforward files. They transfer. Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. You don't need to have the immediacy for the connection. So I guess what I'm saying is you could do this. Number one, it all depends on what you're doing with that drive. If this is for if you use applications or games off that drive, it will work. Nothing wrong with it, but it's going to be slow to load. Everything's going to be very, very slow to load. And some games won't allow it.
Compared to what you'd expect off of USB.
Yeah, Drake Mayer says M.2 NVMe is often a PCIe connection with direct physical connections. Yeah. The PCIe lanes are where we're going in terms of connecting to storage devices now. SATA is obsolete. And the only reason we're still using it is it's a cheap interface, and old style hard drives still use them, but those are on their way out too. I mean, we're going to get to a point where we're not going to even see them in enterprise anymore. It's slow, but for home use, hard drives are slowly on their way out too. As far as wouldn't a long USB cable be susceptible to picking up errors? Not really. Not if it's a properly shielded cable.
Yeah.
It's just when you get past a certain length, I think 10 feet is still within, because 10 feet still within the spec to not cause any sort of issues. It'll still work.
I mean, part of it will depend on what's between you and that 10 feet. If, you say your closet, but if you've got a small microwave in the room, hey, maybe you might have a little issue.
Some people do. Some people have appliances in their little office and whatnot. Once you get past a certain length on USB, it stops working. In fact, any cable, USB, HDMI, DisplayPort, even Ethernet, which is Ethernet's remarkable how far it can transmit data, because that goes for ages. But once you get past a certain length, data doesn't transfer and properly across the cables anymore. In fact, with USB, after a certain point, they actually have an active USB. It's a device it's a powered USB that allows the connection to go further, and it's not cheap. Somebody Coca-Cola ads being annoying. I'm sorry, Ball Pit Spring Bonnie. I apologize for that. Not much I can do, unfortunately. Diagras got an email from Western Digital. They were splitting in two. A hard drive company, Western Digital, SSD company. It's a bit confusing now in terms of warranty. I know. That's ridiculous. All right, I'm going to double check, see if we have anything else new come in, just to be on the out, because we got one more question. But all right, nothing new's come in. So here's the last one for this week. This is from Russell P. Hello, Nash and Mike. I've been eyeing VA vertical alignment, I think is what that means. There's IPS, in-plane switching, OLED, organic light emitting diodes, and VA monitors. I believe it's vertical alignment monitors. It speaks to how they been eyeing a VA 4K monitor for a while, and the one I wanted is down to around $250 now, and that's it's not a bad little monitor. It's a Dell.
Dell 32-inch. That's a decent amount of space.
Curved UHD. It's down $250. VA is vertical alignment. Yeah. I know it's vertical alignment, not top of the line, but it's in my budget and it's much bigger than what I have. What he's talking about here is there is a bit of a hierarchy about how good monitors are. Vertical alignment monitors are cheap because they're not the best.
They may be 100% acceptable for what you're doing, but there are people who are going to go like, oh, yeah, no, that's fine for you, but I need better.
If someone correct me if I'm wrong, I believe viewing angle is one of the issues with vertical alignment monitors, because off-axis viewing becomes a bit of an issue. IPS doesn't have that. There are a couple other things. It's an inferior technology, but it's still a viable technology and it functions just fine. there are a lot of televisions out there. Like you go to Walmart, you see televisions like $300. It's like 65-inch television for $300. Chances are that's a VA panel. TN. Oh yeah, TN's dead. VA has better angles, not as good as IPS. Yeah. Here's my question. I only have an RTX 3060 12 gigabyte. Is it worth it to even get a 4K monitor right now, or should I wait for a bigger video card that can handle 4K? Thank you both, Russell P. No, not really.
The 3060 will handle 4K.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the application we're talking about.
Yeah.
Movies,
you won't be able to do max settings on it, on gaming, but you'll be able to do decent settings.
Yeah, I mean, you will have, if you're talking about movies, 4K with HDR. So that right there, this should handle like Blu-ray playback and stuff. So it might not be the best, but you've got the options there. High dynamic range, Ultra HD. So you'll have that. Yeah, video doesn't matter. Whatever video card you have, just as long as it functions. These days, video card can handle that. But what it comes with games, some older games, you'll be able to hit 4K no trouble. Like you throw in The Witcher 3, turn up all the settings on a 3060 12 gig, that should be able to handle 4K. I mean, someone correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think a 3060 is on a level of about what, 1080 Ti? Maybe I'm overestimating it. 1080 at least. It's a pretty robust little, and it also has access to DLSS.
Yeah.
Not frame generation, but you can get that with FSR. Anyway, newer games that might not be able to go up that high. Well, with a card like this, there's a very simple solution for that. You just turn the resolution down. That will work. The 4K monitor will work at 1440. It'll work at 1080. Heck, it'll even work at something like 720p, depending on the game. I wouldn't want to play at 720p, but that 3060 will be able, you'll still be able to play stuff. It's just not going to be in the highest resolution the monitor can provide. In my opinion, it's better to upgrade your monitor first. If you're stuck between the two, if you have a functional card, having a nicer monitor, because you could always get a video card that can grow into a nicer monitor. And monitors are also one of those things that typically people don't replace those very often.
Unless you're some of my coworkers, man.
Why?
What happens is one person gets a 27-inch monitor.
Oh, God.
And then the next person has to have two 27-inch monitors. And then everyone starts to have 27-inch monitors. I don't have 27-inch monitors growing off a bush in courtyard.
Oh, if only. But yeah, I mean, I've kept monitors up to a decade before. If they were good monitors, they function.
Absolutely.
They're not a purchase. Everything else in your computer will be a more pressing upgrade than once you get a nice monitor.
I've more often replaced a monitor because the monitor died than because I feel a need for an upgrade.
Yeah, I've had that too. Sarah, one of Sarah's monitors just died. She had that dang thing for forever. I think it's the caps. I swapped it out with she doesn't want a bigger monitor, and it drives me crazy. She's like, so I got a bigger one. She's like, no, I want 24-inch monitor. I don't understand, but I did have another 24-inch. I put it in there. Meanwhile, I'll have to look at the old one and see if I can get the caps fixed on it. I don't understand that. Drives me crazy. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't wait for a bigger video card. If this is the monitor you want and you feel comfortable with it, if it's in your price range and something like that, then go for this. I wouldn't worry about that. That 3060 is still a 3060 12 gig is a pretty nice little card. Still.
It's a solid enough card. Like Nash said, you can grow into it with the next. You can grow into that monitor with the next video card, and by next year there might be some great deals on upgrades for you on video cards. You go, oh yeah, and then you put it in and go, wow, everything looks so much better.
And a lot of games like FSR, you're not going to have access to full DLSS with the RTX 3060. You're going to have access to DLSS 2 because NVIDIA and their infinite wisdom blocked off DLSS 3 to, or the frame gen stuff and the other stuff to the RTX 40 series because they're dicks like that. You will have access to stuff like FSR and Intel's XeSS. So there are other ways to improve performance. What those technologies do is they take lower resolution images and make them look larger. It's like if you're playing in 4K, what you're actually doing is, while you might not be aware of it, you've got 1440p is what's actually going on, and it's using the machine learning functions and all of that to make the image, scale the image up and make it look 4K while also correcting for anti-aliasing, to introduce in-between frames. Oh yeah, XeSS is surprisingly good. I hope Intel keeps sticking around to develop the damn thing. So there are ways to play games in a higher resolution than you normally would be able to and still make it look pretty good, even with an older card. You are going to face some limitations, but it's all about trade-offs with this. But yeah, go ahead and grab that monitor. If you've been waiting for it, $250 is not a bad deal for a 32-inch curved monitor. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, that's cheaper than the ones I order at work.
Yeah, and even for a VA, it's VA, it's still perfectly acceptable. So, all right, let's see here. Just one more go around, see if anything's new. Nope, that's it for this week. Okay. So we will be back next Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern. If you have tech questions for me and Mike, you can send those to requests at radiodeadair.com, and we will do our best to put those on for you. Meanwhile, for Mike and myself, we'll see you next time. Good night, folks.